Hi there, this is Arun, and let me start off my first ever video by sharing my experience in the magic of ASP.NET MVC. MVC stands for Model View Controller, about which we'll talk about in a minute. But first things first, we obviously need a development environment in which we can actually implement our MVC solution or project, for which we would actually have to go to visualstudio.com and install Visual Studio, the community edition. Just click download there and it should install it for you. I'll give you guys a minute or two and then I'll come back. Now, MVC stands for Model View Controller, models being the business layer, views being the presentation layer, and controllers which control the requests and input from the client system. What a model should contain is the state of the application, and the business logic and any other logic that you want to put in. The views basically just contain the view, the presentation, how a particular set of models is supposed to be displayed, and such. The controllers, usually what it does is manages how a request from a user's client browser gets processed. We can search for ASP.NET MVC and MVC framework or MVC model view controller on Google and pretty much find a plethora of information about this stuff. They are a little there could be some academic definitions of MVC, but basic concept is to separate the business logic from the presentation. Okay. Anyway, be sure to visit shopsource.bitworkstudios.com, where I have this tutorial in text as well. And leave your comments if you have any. Alright, so it looks like it's created the project. There you can see on the right. It'll give you this neat tutorial about ASP.NET MVC, which I'm trying to do as well. I can go through all this stuff or just listen to my tutorial here. Close that. So you can see there's a bunch of folders and files that you can see here. What I usually do is just delete all those boilerplate stuff because I like to start fresh so that I understand. Now I have full control of my application. So what we'll do is delete all the stuff that we don't want. We'll delete the styles, we'll delete the fonts, we'll delete the scripts, we'll delete the models folder at least. We'll keep the views for now. We will have to uninstall the NuGet packages. We'll do it manually. So what we don't want is modernizer because we just deleted it, and jQuery, Bootstrap, all that stuff, and this one maybe. Keep the rest. Alright, there we go, and we'll delete that and that as well. Oop. All right. So open everything up. Close that. All right. So this, delete that. Let me delete that as well. So this is your basic skeleton structure of how I would like my projects to start. All right, the first thing we want to do is see if our project is running. So build it. Now, one thing I want to mention is that the project that we just built has to be hosted somewhere as a web server that needs to host it so that the browser can actually make a request to that server. So what Visual Studio Community Edition has is, actually it's part of Windows 8, but what Visual Studio Community Edition uses is the something called as an IIS Express, which is a web server, which pretty much is a full-fledged server, except it doesn't have some advanced management functions. We'll talk about that later. But that's what it's doing. It's basically building your solution, building a project, attaching it to the IIS Express on that address, and starting up the browser to point to that address. Yep, that seems to be right. So the main thing was that it built successfully. We'll make it run. The error that you saw here, that you're seeing here, is because we deleted all those lovely JS files, JavaScript files. Anyway, we'll go ahead and maybe delete that. Delete all the other ones. So I'll talk about bundles a little bit later, once we actually get some stuff running. Delete those as well. Alright. Alright, now if I run it, it should run. Let's skip that part. Let's start. I usually start with a good UI. It's usually a good idea to start with the UI so that you don't have to remember how the user interacts with the application, and it's there as a prototype for you to work with. So let's just start with a simple very simple HTML document. We won't need that. We'll delete all this. And we'll delete that. Alright, what you see here in the shared underscore layout file is the master page, which if you were familiar with web forms, this is what basically it is. A master page which defines the basic structure of the base structure of your web application front end. So this can be any file. You could pretty much put any name they want. The underscore there refers to what I usually think of it is that users cannot directly view those pages, or not supposed to view those pages. Those are just for processing on the back end. And a full named file like index.cshtml. Index.cshtml is a file that a user can land on. So there's quite a few things that we want to cover for this tutorial. The thing that we're doing right now is the views. Alright. Like I said, this could be any file. The way MVC, ASP.NET MVC knows that this is your default layout or master page that you want to display to render your output on your views is through this. In this file, you just mention your default layout. Of course, you can later on, I'll show you how you can have any layout, any different number of layouts, and manually put those layouts in the views, views themselves. But this would basically be your default layout there. Now you can see that these special tokens, programming tokens there, those are from the ASP.NET MVC's Razor web page language or markup, if you will. Anything that starts with an @ the Razor processor knows that that's supposed to be a command, a language that Razor is supposed to process, not as text or HTML, but a C# set of statements. So here, what we have done is we've done an @ opened a code block and closed the code block. And in between, we've assigned the layouts property. Now you might wonder where this layouts property is coming from. If you were familiar with the web forms, you know that each page inherits from a base page. Which I don't remember. If I remember, it's system.web.ui.page, if I'm correct. If not, it's something similar to that. But in a similar fashion, the Razor pages inherit from a set of classes. So in this case, the view start is inheriting from the start page, and let's see what the layouts is inheriting from. The layouts is inheriting from the web page base. So there's different types of pages that there. For now, we'll just use the web page base for our purposes, for our blog. All right. So I'm not gonna bore you guys with what Razor is and how Razor is, because once you start looking at how I'm developing on the Razor language, it'll become much easier, and it's much interesting that way. I usually don't like academic views of stuff, rather just go in and do it. All right. So now that we know how how we set up the layout page, we have a very, very basic markup here. I'll delete that for now. Have a very, very basic HTML markup here. And this is a placeholder where your nested pages, web forms, tech terminology, or your actual landing pages deliver content, render content. So every layout page is supposed to have a render body command there. All right. And when we go to a landing page, for example, home, if I say hello world, oops. So what this is going to do is basically render that hello world in this placeholder, and the browser outputs this entire compiled rendered view to the browser, to the user. All right. Now that we've done the view, all right, I want to discuss another thing, is the naming conventions. So ASP.NET MVC is very, very flexible, but if you don't want to hard code your boilerplate stuff like connecting your controller to your view, there's a certain set of naming conventions that the ASP.NET world follows. So anything ASP.NET MVC world follows. So any controller, say for example in our case a home controller, has a view associated with it, has a set of views associated with it. So how you put those, how you define those views is in the views folder in the root and followed by the controller name. Now you can see that the controller's class name is home controller, but the controller's name itself is just home. So that's how the ASP.NET MVC framework identifies your controller. So your controller's name is home, but the class that defines the controller is the name of the controller plus the word controller itself. All right, so this, let me delete that as well. All right, now what we want to do is basically set up a home page. That's what we want to do. When a user clicks your link to your home page or your base domain, they want to land on a page. That's what we want to do right now. So usually it's always for historical purposes, which I'm not sure of, it's always called an index, probably because it's a document and something to do with an index card, maybe, I don't know. So how you define the point of entry in an MVC is through something called as an action. So basically every controller has a various set of actions that it can do, that the user can interact with, that the user can input data to. So in this case, we'll call it index. How you can access this action is through whatever your base URL is, so /controller/index. So that's your controller there, and that's your action there. Now this is how I can directly access this this action. Sometimes it might be required that I want users to directly access this action without having this home/index. So how you define this is through something called as a route table configuration. Now routes are basically the routes that you take through to actions. Now the routes can be found in something called as the route config in the app_start folder. So you can see that the basic structure of the URL here is a controller, an action, and an ID. So let's just remove the ID for now because we're not doing any data manipulations yet. So we'll just put it as controller/action. So if I want to go to the index page, basically be home/action. But as a default, I want the index page to be my base URL as well. So this is how we define the default. So you have home/index. Yep. All right, now so this is basically how we set up the controllers, actions, and the views. So let's just start with our requirement that we want a blog. So I don't want to call it home as such. So we'll just delete that controller there and create a new controller called blog. So don't be mistaken by, don't be intimidated or overwhelmed by all these dialog boxes that come in. A controller is basically just a class. It's a very, very simple class which inherits the base class called controller. So I don't even have to go through. I'll show you. I don't even have to go through add and controller there. I could just might have succeeded with just creating add class and the home controller and inherit the controller base class there. But in any case, all right. So if the best thing about ASP.NET MVC is that it makes you think how a web server works, how the web itself works in terms of how your browser communicates with your application, and how the web server interprets requests from the web browser, and vice versa. There are two main methods that we will be using for our exercise here is a HTTP post and an HTTP GET. So when we browse to any web location, Reddit for example, and let me show you what kind of communication goes behind these behind rendering this web page to the server. So if you have Internet Explorer 11 IE or Chrome or Firefox, if you press F12 on your computer on your keyboard, you'll get this console, a developer tools console, which lets you break down communications from your web browser. So we'll go right to the network tab and play, and we'll refresh it, and this will basically record all the requests that your browser does to the Reddit's server in this case. All right, let that load. In the meantime, I'll just show you. So you can see that what first happens is it loads the initial request, which is your reddit.com that you clicked on the URL with the protocol of HTTP, and the method. This is what I was talking about. We will be using two types of methods to talk to the server. One is a GET and the other is a POST. That's a status code we'll talk about later. But what happens is when the HTML gets received by the browser, it also has to load the other assets like pictures and styles and JavaScript files, etc., which actually put your make your page look good. So those ones are followed after the main request. So you can see all these other stuff are basically those assets. So if you have a look, CSS, JS, SVG, graphics files, GIF files, etc. So we'll close that. So that's some basic about how your browser talks to the web server. So what we're going to use for our index action is a get method. So let's go and decorate it with this attribute HTTP get on that method. So I must stress that this is again just a very simple class, or you can just a normal class with a return type and some attributes, and that's about it. It's nothing more than that. There's no hidden stuff going on behind. All it's doing is just inheriting from this controller, and what your server does is when a request comes in, checks which controller it wants to go to, and checks which action it has to invoke. In this case, if we want to invoke the index, it goes here, sees what are your logic that you've put in here, how you want to manage those requests, and responds back to the server. That's all it does. All right. I did say that the MVC framework is a very much convention-based as well. So here you can see that the blog controller has an action called index, and it needs to have a similar view. So you have the folder already created. We'll delete that for now. So it already has a folder called blog within the views folder. So we want to create the actual view itself. So we just go ahead and create a view called index. Use a layout page. We'll just use the default layout. Add. Delete that. That. All right, so now you can see that if I request for the index action, what the controller is going to do is return me the view that maps to this structure, similar structure in the views folder. So you have the index.html. Now, if I run this program right now, it technically shouldn't work. Let's see. And I'll tell you why in a minute. It will build because all our classes are correct, and it will compile, but you won't reach that blocks page as your base landing page. Yep. So the server says that it can't find the page we're looking for. So what is the page we're looking for? How do we tell the server that the page that we want for our base landing page is the home page is blocks/index action, blocks controller/index action? Do you remember I talked about the route config? That's where we set it. So just go ahead and set the default controller as blog and default action is index. And if I go now, fingers crossed, it should work. There we go. So if you look at the markup that's being output, you'll see that it's the base HTML document with the base start there and the body HTML there. I'll talk to you about what that is right now, but this is basically the index pages, index views content there. Now this one is a new feature with Visual Studio where your browser gets updated automatically when you change something here on your code. So for example, if I want to change that to hello worlds, the browser gets automatically updated, but eventually, hopefully. That's what it was meant to do, but I usually don't use it at all. So you can turn that off. You should turn that off because there's a lot. You can see how this works. Is basically pings the browser every few seconds to see if there's any update, and it makes the updates. But we don't want that. We just do the refresh manually. So what we'll do is we will disable that, if I remember here, and uncheck that. Now if I run it, it should give me a very, very clean and neat HTML. Oh, let's go to the home page. And if you look at the source, there you go. Alright, so that was your Hello Worlds program there. Alright, so all we have done right now is basically set up our skeleton structure for the project so that we can start working on the actual requirements, which is a blog. So the first thing a blog would need is our users. Yeah, so users as in authors and editors, etc., etc. For simplicity's sake, all we'll have is two types of users: an author and a reader. A reader is basically anyone who wishes to come to your site and does not need to have an account with you. An author definitely needs an account so that they can log in and author their own stuff and not mess with other people's stuff. Alright, let's start with creating a login page where the author can log in. So we want our login page to be reached through a certain URL. So I personally like say, for example, HTTP blog app just the domain /account/login. So I'd like to reach my login page through that URL. So let's get that done. First thing I would need is an account controller. Virtual machines a bit slow today. Alright, let's just create a controller. what this scaffolding means is that it creates the controller and it also creates the relevant folder. So we'd have the accounts controller there and the views slash account folder there. So you can see that. That's what the scaffolding does. But like I said, account, the controller itself is just a plain class, just a normal C# class. Alright, if you can see that you have the account controller there, and I want it to be login or sign. Let's go sign in. Sign in. And let's make that a get. So like we've discussed before, the action there, the sign in, needs basically when someone calls this action, it needs to do something. So what I want to do is display the login view. So in that case, I will create a view for that. Add. So that's created that, and the account controller is there. So let's just check that it works. Let's just run it. All right. Find it there. Account / sign in. Alright, seems to work. Now I'll just keep the debugger running so that I can just refresh it and check what my update looks like. I don't need that. We'll talk about the view bag a little later. First, let's get a workable prototype up and running for this. So I'm not going to care about the look of the app yet. So let's just make it functional first. For that, just basic HTML form. No need to action, because then we can just send it back to the same. Actually, I'll put the action. So Razor has helper classes, which are basically just extension classes to the HTML URL helper or HTML helper class, which is part of the page that we inherit. So what this one does is basically just construct a URL to the action that we're going to specify, which is and the controller. We need a method. We need to post. And to put it, let's do a label which says username. Let's do email. All right. So email and password, let's check if that's actually what they are. All right. So we have the inputs there. Of course, I need a submit button. I was thinking what I was missing here. Alright, so this should give us a basic form so that we can log in. Alright. So basically what's going to happen is when I click this button, I'll open the network profiler as well. So let's put some values in there. When I click that button there, submit button there, the browser's gonna post some values, these form values, to the server, to the specified action. The action that we specified was account/sign-in. So let's go ahead and do that and see what's happening. What happened? So as you can see here that we got, so this was our request there to the sign-in action with these form values, but we got a response of 404, not found, even though there is an action called sign in. So I'll show you what really happened there. So do you remember the two methods that we were going to use to contact our servers? One was a get method and a post method. What the browser tried to do was do a post method to that action, and we didn't define any post method to that action. So that's what we'll do right now. So the way you define that an action is a post method is using these C# attributes to that function. Now to sign in, we need the email and the password. What MVC, ASP.NET MVC does is directly map the inputs here, the form values in our request, which are basically the form values in our request. So for example, this is a password and this is an email, and if you see the actual request, let's just do this. I'll just show you after we actually complete the account, the sign-in functionality. All right. So what ASP.NET MVC does is sees what are the parameters that have been passed through the request in the post, and maps it based on the names. So email, even with a capital E, maps to an email with a all lowercase email, and password similar way. All right, so now that we have the action completed, we want a way to authenticate that user is actually authenticated. So the way we're going to do that is through now this is where we're gonna go into more of patterns. So I'm gonna go more into a service-oriented architecture with my app here. So what I'm going to do is create a new project, a class library. And call it, what do we want to call it? Let's call it engine, which basically takes care of all our app's business logic. Let's delete the boilerplate stuff, the default stuff. Just want to check what namespace I've given. All right, just web. Okay, I will create. So like I said, everything is going to be a service in our app. So taking care of the accounts will be an account service. So let's go ahead and create that account. And let's just create an interface. Call it account service and create the actual service itself. I will tell you much later why we're going to be using the interfaces in terms of services for all services. But right now, just let's just use interface for this purpose. And we create a class or a service which inherits from that interface. We need this to be accessible everywhere. Alright, let's create a sign in method. Alright, so this is basically what it does. We'll implement that method here. For some reason oh, there it is. In this tutorial, I won't be talking about the data access part, the model part. So let's just create a simple, a very simple authentication, basic authentication here, which basically says return email equal to email at email.com. And password equal to password. But basically, if the username's email at email.com and the password is password, this will return a true. So it's very simple authentication. Actually, this is a non-authentication. Don't ever do that in production, but I'm just showing it for the tutorial's sake. Let's just create the service here. So to access that service, you'll need to add a reference to the other class library, the engine. Now, for simplicity's sake, we'll just have a failed authentication page. I'll create a partial for that. And a not passed page. what I want to do is display this page when the username and password match, and display that page. The username and password don't match. And how we are going to do that is manually point to those two views in this controller. So let's do a logic here. If account service sign. Actually, we are doing it authenticate, so let's just change that to authenticate. Yeah, for some reason my IntelliSense stopped working. But anyway, we just we don't need that. Alright, so if we have successfully authenticated, return the auth field. So how are you going to point to that view is using this. The tilde key basically says from the root directory go to views, go to count, and auth success or passed. Otherwise, go to auth failed. Alright, so hopefully, forgot the extensions there. So let's cross our fingers and see if that works. So what's basically supposed to happen is the browser posts those two values, the email and the password, form values, to our action there, and that action then takes care of the authentication, checks whether the authentication is successful, and then shows us the relevant view. Alright, so let's try to sign in. We will put in a breakpoint here to actually see what the control flow is like. So I'm gonna put in email at email.com and password, and password there. Yeah, let's see the network traffic for this as well. All right. So, it's odd. I didn't get any. Anyway, so trust me on this. What the browser did was post the two formulas, email and password, to our action here. So that's what we can see, and we can see that the passed in value is email at email.com there, and password. And this is taken care of something called by something called as a model binder. which is part of the ASP.NET MVC framework. And if we actually go in there, that's just going to compare and give us a value and return true because we know. And if I play that, that's going to give us a not success page, hopefully, not pass. There we go. All right, we still, this is a basic, this is the most basic form of ASP.NET MVC, where we just learned how the browser communicates with the with our app. Next lesson we'll actually move on to models, more of data modeling and how we can use models to access databases and do more complex processing with our requests. All right, hope you guys enjoyed this or not, but it would be grateful if you could leave in comments and your interests and ways I can improve my tutorials. I'll try my best to get all your suggestions into my videos. Anyway, see ya. Bye.